Nick, our listeners probably are not surprised that Pierre Poilievre is the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, but have they actually seen a bump in support?
Latest Nanos tracking, very interesting. Conservatives 31%, Liberals 28%. So the Conservatives are 3 points up. NDP 26%. But here's the kicker. You know, when you look at that trend, at least over the last 4 weeks, the Liberals are down a full 5 percentage points. The New Democrats are up 6 percentage points.
Wow.
So right now, the red team is getting squeezed with, it looks like some disaffected, disappointed, disgruntled, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, something. Liberals parking with the New Democrats. And that's very bad news for the Liberals right now, because those vote splits will, if this holds up, those vote splits kind of like, remember Stephen Harper, he kind of won on Liberal NDP vote splits. It's like Back to the Future, Michael. If this holds up, it's going to be very good news for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives if the NDP do this well.
I hope we don't disappear, Nick, if it is like Back to the Future. Well, to our listeners, we are back. Yes, you're listening to CTV News Trendline podcast. Nick and I are back from our summer break. Nick, you're looking good. You're looking relaxed.
Well, thank you.
and today we'll be talking about Poilievre. We'll be talking about the fight over inflation and also Canada's, I guess I can say, complicated relationship with our monarchy. So Nick, let's get into it. Poilievre, he had his debut as Conservative Party leader this week in the House of Commons during question period, and he had some choice words for the party in power.
Can't even afford to have a family in the first place because they can't get out of their parents' basements or out of 400 square foot apartments after housing prices have literally doubled in this country under this prime minister. And now, with rising interest rates, which this government promised would not happen anytime soon, families have to spend 50% of their income just to keep a roof over their head, the highest in over 3 decades. And the solution from the Liberals? Higher taxes on gas, groceries, and paychecks. Will they follow the Conservative demand and cancel all of these tax hikes on workers and seniors?
So, Nick, Poilievre is really, hitting his core message that I guess the cost of living is extremely high for working Canadians, and the quality of life is going down under this government.
Absolutely. It looks like, at least in first, why don't we call this salvo number one, right? From the Conservative bench over to the Liberals. It's going to be a meat and potatoes agenda. And you know what? That's really what Canadians are worried about right now. You know, like even in the unprompted issue of concern every week, cost of goods, economy and jobs are top issues. They're like tied for the top. So not a big surprise. But how about this? What didn't we hear? We didn't hear the B word, Bitcoin. We didn't hear the other BOC word, Bank of Canada, and the Governor of Bank of Canada. I don't think we got very much of the F word either. And I mean, freedom. Pierre Poilievre talking about freedom. So what does this look like? You know, it looks like a focus on what I'll say, the mainstream, pragmatic Canadians who are worried about just paying the bills. And that's really, I'm not even going to call it a sweet spot because that implies that it's small. That's really the prime target, and that's really what Canadians want to hear about from all of the federal parties. So I think we have to say on day one, at least for Pierre Poilievre, his appearance in the House of Commons, he was definitely on point.
So maybe it's fair to say a more polished message than what we saw during the Conservative leadership campaign. You know, when he did talk about cryptocurrency, etc. It's interesting to me to see sort of the evolution of Pierre Poilievre, but he's always been a very intense guy, I think it's fair to say. So in 2014, CTV Ottawa actually did a report on his fitness routine, and it was pretty intense. Listen to this.
That's it. Good.
For those watching us on YouTube, you can see it, but for our listeners, essentially Poilievre is flipping a truck tire. He's running up a muddy hill with his coach.
Sprint. That's it.
When you don't have a lot of time in the gym, you got to get in and get her done. That means you have to hit it hard.
Come on, one more. Okay, good.
I don't know how you would describe this sort of fitness routine, but I mean, what's your take on that, Nick?
I think were they supposed to play like either Eye of the Tiger or the Rocky theme for this? Because I felt like he was some heavy duty training. What this puts into clarity is part of I'll call it the Poilievre franchise, his communications franchise, and how effective he is. Him flipping over those large truck tires, and maybe he started getting into trucks and the trucking ahead of everyone else because he was so close to those tires. But anyways, that's a different story. But his ability to use these symbols to convey messages, and he did this in the workout. Throughout the campaign, he had the one video, if I could paraphrase, Ode to Canadian Wood, where he talked about Canadian wood. Or the other one with the slice of bread. Why don't we call that In Praise of Affordable Bread, right? So, he has, he's able and very effective at using these symbols to cut through all the clutter, to give a very direct message that people can understand, and he has been honing this talent over a very, very long time. So, I think the fact of the matter is that whether you agree or disagree with his politics, it's very powerful messaging that people can understand. And the other thing is it shows how intense, the clip of him working out with the big truck tires and stuff like that just shows how intense he is as a person and effective as a political communicator.
It's really interesting in contrast with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who had a moment on social media a couple of days ahead of the Queen's funeral, when he was singing along to Bohemian Rhapsody on piano. Like what do you think Trudeau has in store? I mean, how are voters sort of responding to each message?
Well, I think both of these party leaders are actually very polarizing figures in our politics right now, and Canadians have very firm opinions whether they like or dislike both Trudeau and Poilievre. And in terms of what happened before and the singing of the song, the reality is when you're the Prime Minister of Canada, whenever you're in any public space, that you're being observed. So this is not a mistake. Justin Trudeau knew what he was doing, and obviously was very comfortable in what I'll say the risk or the possibility of him being recorded, and that's what Canadians have seen.
Nik, I want to move on to one of the top issues facing Canadians. So you do your own issue tracking, and I think the political fight over cost of living is really one that strikes a chord in a lot of Canadians. And where is that in your issue tracking currently?
Well, cost of living is tied in the number one position, along with jobs in the economy, healthcare, and the environment. So Michael, why don't we just call this? There's a cocktail of worries and concerns that Canadians have right now. It's like they can't pick. It's like everything's going wrong at the same time. The rent is going up. You can't get into an emergency ward. People are worried about climate change and the environment, and the economy is going into recession. Like, I don't know what else could happen, and I don't even want to say that there isn't anything else bad that could happen. And why don't we throw in Ukraine and threat of escalation of tensions there? So everything's going wrong. But in the tracking, when we ask Canadians about the standard of living, and this is one of the key things that I look at and monitor on a regular basis, when we ask them whether they think that the next generation will have a better standard of living, the same standard of living, or a worse standard of living, about 62%, or more than 6 out of every 10, think that the next generation will have a worse standard of living, while only 11% think that it will be better. So there's not a lot of optimism right now about the future, and it speaks to the importance of all the parties to focus on this. Obviously, Pierre Poilievre wants to focus on that. And for the Liberals, they're trying to figure out how people can manage through this process. And for the New Democrats, what they're trying to do is to figure out, bespoke policies that can help the day-to-day lives of Canadians. So I think everyone's going to be crowding in on this space, just because it's such a dark cloud hanging over so many Canadians.
There does seem to be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. The latest consumer price index shows inflation slowing a little bit. The rise of inflation over the past couple months. The price of gas has gone down. Food continues to go up, however. So, I mean, do you think that in the long run, this might actually dampen the messaging from Poilievre and the NDP over cost of living?
Hey, listen, at 7%, if 7% going down to 7%, the light at the end of the tunnel, Michael, is a freight train. But it's not hopeful.
Not good.
Like 7% is high compared to where interest rates, where inflation has been, at least over the last number of years. And interest rates are going up. That's why, people, we talked about people just paying the rent and paying the mortgage. I think about 28% of Canadians are worried or somewhat worried about paying the rent or the mortgage. And that might not seem like a lot, but even during the pandemic, as opposed to 28%, it was 16%, 15%, back in 2021. 28% is 8.7 million Canadians. So there are a lot of people right now that are just worried about, do I have enough money to pay the rent or the mortgage in the next while?
Nik, you've also been tracking how Canadians feel about housing costs as well.
Yeah, and the thing is so think of it this way: the cost of housing is going up because of interest rates, but our weekly tracking, when we ask about the value of real estate, is now underwater. And when I say underwater, it means that Canadians are more likely to think that the value of real estate is going to go down than go up in the next 6 months. And to put this into context, in the last 16 years that we've been tracking this all the time, Canadians have always consistently thought that real estate prices and values would continue to rise. So you've got like a double whammy right now, Michael, where if you're in the market, you think the value of your home is going to go down, and you're feeling worried about that. If you're not in the market, it's still unaffordable and completely out of reach, and you're worried about just being able to pay the rent or being able to cover off mortgage rates and interest rates that have been highs that we haven't seen, at least for a decade.
So I just going back to the ballot tracking that we mentioned at the top of the show, Nik. This seems to sort of increase support for the NDP and for the Conservatives. So I think people are blaming the party in power. I think that's fair to say. So how do the Liberals tackle this?
Oh man, they've just got to ride it out. And the reality is, this is a perfect storm for both the Conservatives and the New Democrats. This is kind of like, why don't we call this? It's kind of like a political piranha tank. You know what I mean? Like Justin Trudeau is being lured into a piranha tank, and he's got both the Conservatives and the NDP kind of trying to eat into Liberal support, and that's what we're seeing right now. And we have to remember that even though all the parties are low on their level of support, right? The Conservatives are first, still at 31%. What really counts are seats in the House of Commons. And this is where the vote splits are actually absolutely critical. And, with the New Democrats, if they're in the mid-20s, they're basically spoiling the election for the Liberals. And what the Liberals have to worry about, what they have to hope for at least, is that people are just temporarily parking with the New Democrats. Because the longer people park in the New Democrat space, the more likely they are to stay there. So actually, the Liberals have to do something to shake some of those progressive voters that are drifting to the New Democrats to come back to the Liberals, so they don't get too comfy with Team Orange and they potentially come back to the red team. But you know what? Right now, Jagmeet Singh should be Pierre Poilievre's best friend. You're never going to see Pierre Poilievre attack Jagmeet Singh. He's going to want him to perform well in order to have those vote splits for the Conservatives to pop up the middle and capture more seats in the House of Commons.
Nik, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll take a look at how Canadians feel about our monarchy. Nik, we saw an outpouring of grief over the death of Queen Elizabeth II in Britain and around the the Commonwealth. But in Canada, we've always had sort of a complicated relationship with the monarchy. And you've been tracking this for a while. I think you had the latest numbers a few months ago. What does that tell us?
Well, just back in May, before the passing away of Queen Elizabeth II, we did a survey and asked how Canadians felt about cutting ties with the British monarchy. And actually, Canadians are divided on it. About just as many people think that it's a very good or good time as think that it's a poor or very poor time to cut ties with the British monarchy. It's going to be interesting to see what happens now that Queen Elizabeth II has passed away. But basically division. So not big in favor or opposed. It's kind of like almost it's like we're completely divided on cutting ties with the monarchy.
So now we have King Charles III, and I'm curious, Nick, if you think he's going to swing the pendulum in either direction on this debate.
Well, I think it's. I'd like to say it's weird just to say King Charles III because I don't know. Queen Elizabeth II is all we know and all we have known, at least in our lifetimes, and so. Will it swing the pendulum? I think in the short term, there'll probably be a bit of a honeymoon, sympathy rising out of the passing away of Queen Elizabeth II. And obviously nothing has gone wrong. Everything has gone right. It was quite a moment. I think we have to say it was quite a moment in history, especially for any country that's a member of the Commonwealth, to witness the passing away of Queen Elizabeth II, who had served for such a long time. But it's like, not to diminish the monarchy, but it's kind of like politics. Politicians do well until they don't do well. And, we'll see whether there are any bumps in the new, our new monarch, Charles III. Because, the reality is that views on the monarchy are susceptible to fluctuations, just like views on every other I should say, institution that we have.
And I suppose saying that you are indifferent or even oppose the monarchy is one thing, but actually potentially abolishing the monarchy and changing our constitution, I mean, that's quite another. I think you also did some tracking, Nick, on when Canadians would feel it would be the right time to even think about cutting ties.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is we tested on withdrawal from the Commonwealth, which are all the countries that part of the former British Empire. And actually what we do know from this piece of research is that Canadians are twice as likely to oppose or somewhat oppose pulling out of the Commonwealth. So, a division on our connection or cutting ties to the British monarchy, but a pretty strong majority, about 61%, would oppose or somewhat oppose Canada withdrawing from the Commonwealth. But the other thing in all of this, we could ask these polling questions, but to do either one of these things is massive. It's like reopening the Constitution and all that stuff. So think of it this way: I'm not sure, setting aside public opinion, whether if any government wanted to embark on any one of those things, that anyone would really believe that it's the right time to do so. Because think of it this way: people are struggling to pay the rent. The healthcare system is perceived to be in crisis. The environment, people are worried about the environment. They're worried about having a recession. And I think the last thing Canadians would want, at least at this point in time, is to spend any bandwidth in our democracy on changing the rules, shuffling the chairs, and changing the monarchy, because the reality is unless there's something seriously wrong, there are other more important issues like paying the bills, economic prosperity, our healthcare, and the environment that Canadians will probably more likely want to see all politicians focus on.
Well, Nick, let's leave it there. As always, thanks for your insights.
Take it easy.